Hey everybody, hope you had a good turkey day. I had two dinners, or a lunch and a dinner, one with my wife's family, sort of out in the country, and then with my brother and his family and his in-laws and some of my family, which was big, and a lot of people, a lot of kids, and the food was incredible because my brother's actually a chef and he cooked all the food or most of it. That was really good. Anyway, we had a big contest yesterday, the Rainmakers $2 million holiday set contest with $1 million first prize on the 3-game slate. And then there was a DFS one. There were several, but DraftKings had one with a $20 entry fee that was 2.5 million prize pool. So let's go over what happened in those. So, I did a couple of videos about the holiday one with the flannel cards and all that for Rainmakers. And at the time I was talking about the entries, now being a key thing, and then I think there were 1,300, then it went up to like 2,000. I said, well, if it doesn't fill or if there aren't that many entries, that's more of an advantage. But it actually, a lot of entries came in at the end, and I didn't track them, real time or anything. But it obviously is. It was a lot of whales. It was people that were saying, well, let me plunk down another $1,000 lineup, another $1,000, because the prize was so big. But the key really is how heavily stacked it is to the top. And this is where it got brutal, because 1 million down to 100,000. So the winner of the contest was Shaloub, who had at least 11 entries. He is a whale, possibly one of the biggest Rainmakers whales. I did a video earlier about luckytrader.com looking at some whale accounts in their portfolios, and he was on that. He's also on their Discord, which a lot of the people on there are whales, and or a lot of the whales are on there, and he's a nice guy. But he had 11 lineups, so at least 11 lineups. So there was ended up being a 5-way tie, and then it comes down to serial numbers in DraftKings Rainmakers. There's no like equal distribution of the pot like there is in DFS. So he had the lowest serial number by far combination, 213. Next one was 1520, 1659, 2661, 3031. These don't matter quite as much because it wasn't that much money, but that 1 and 2 slot was $900,000 difference on serial numbers. So got a feel for that guy. Of course, his serial numbers weren't that low really for a kind of a contest like this with smaller card pool. But Cousins and Jefferson was the stack that came in with the late game scoring, and Stevenson piled up a lot of points to slip in with 9 receptions primarily. He didn't break 100 yards or have a touchdown. This was the contrarian play that did it, that came in for him, and several people had it. I mean, that's one thing I had mentioned is I thought there was a good likelihood of a tie in this tournament, and that serial numbers likely would come into play, or a good possibility, and that could cost a lot of money or make a big difference. I showed the chalk on this in 2 different videos on that tourney, and these were just straight from projections from a premium site. But basically, the lineup was pretty chalk, with the exception of Cousins sort of booting out Allen and Jefferson coming in as a superstar, because the actual chalk lineup was Allen, Cook, Diggs, Lamb, and St. Brown. And Diggs, these came in, that Stevenson was right next to Cook, so 17.1, 17.5. So they were basically grouped together. Stevenson edged him out. Jefferson came in. But Cousins wasn't. He was a little behind Goff. And that sort of showed here more when I was talking about if you were fading Allen and Diggs because they were more expensive and the most popular cards. Then the primary lineup was Dak, then Cook or Stevenson, Jefferson, superstar, Lamb, and St. Brown. And then the next sort of tier was Goff or Cousins in there, and Barkley. And then Davis was also, but I said he was more in this group. I know that group, Schultz came in. I don't think the rest of them came in that good. Hawkinson was decent. And they had Pollard pretty low, and he didn't do much, and Zeke did, which was sort of logical. Well, that Jerry Jones would want him to do well on Thanksgiving game type of thing. I also did a quick video when I was actually driving to Thanksgiving, but it got cut off. I didn't realize the shorts are only 15 seconds long. So I ended up deleting it or hiding it or whatever. But basically, all I got out in that was that I said the contrarian offenses were Minnesota and the Giants. Of course, this was after I had all my lineups entered, and I was in a rush really this morning. I had entered my Rainmakers ones already, but the DFS ones. Um, so I didn't. I had four. I didn't enter the big contest. That was too much for me to want to put in at this point. But I had like two rare of these semi showdowns and two core, and I didn't cash in any of them. So I would have been so much better off putting those players into deep lineups because did have Cousins and Jefferson, and I didn't stack them together. I was relying so much on this that I ended up putting Dak with him, and I had Mac Jones a couple times. I had some things. I almost want a booster pack on a core, but I definitely, in retrospect, would have been better off either just doing one of each lineup or putting, which probably would have been what I would have done normally. I wouldn't have totally not entered the contest, but and then putting the others into the deeps because I didn't have an Allen or Diggs or a St. Brown. I've sold a Diggs and a St. Brown. I've sold all three of those actually previously, so that's why I don't have those. I've sold a Stevenson. Anyway, pretty chalk lineups, which lends to a good possibility of a tie. On the actual DFS DraftKings, this was a $20 entry one that had $1 million first prize. And just looking at the lineup that won, I guess you could say the contrarian plays were Cousins, Zeke, Aguilar was like the cookie, and the Bills defense only had 10%, which is sort of surprising. That didn't score that much. Yeah, the Cousins, Jefferson, the Zeke was a contrarian, and then the Aguilar. Now there were like McKenzie and Richie James came in, and I'm not sure if any other low price ones came in, but I didn't have hardly any of them. I think I had one McKenzie. So sort of off the bat, I knew I was not going to win big prizes. And I didn't have Cousins and Jefferson hardly at all, which is ridiculous. I guess I could blame a little of that on the fact that I just rushed in. I probably put in about $100 total and got back like only 20, 25. Because I entered that one time, and then I entered a $27 single entry one time, and this was 20. And this one I came up with on my own, I believe, and this one was the highest projected optimal from that site. And for example, if I had more time, I would have, just because these were my two largest dollar entries, I would have compared the two and I wouldn't have had so much overlap. There's not a ton of overlap. But here I sort of went Dak, but a little contrarian in terms of just having Schultz. Schultz I really did like. Dak was Schultz and not like Lamb, and maybe he would throw it to other people or run one in. Barkley, which is pretty contrarian. Diggs and St. Brown I liked, and they came in big. Knox, I never really liked him. I'm not really sure why I put him in there. Pat's D. Jamal Williams was cheap. Slayton was cheap. And, pretty much should have been their main weapon or was previously. On there, the only thing I don't like in retrospect is the too much overlap here, like having the Pat's D on both. I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have done Jamal Williams on both. But their lineup had actually an Allen, Diggs, and Gabe Davis when I ran it, the highest score projected one. Ramondre, who did come in good, Jamal Williams. They like these, really, really cheap backup tight ends. I think Hudson and Wright, but I think Hudson was the one that didn't come in. Schultz did. And they had the Pats D. So I wouldn't have had the overlap. And I ended up, I think that was 13 points out of the money, and that was like 8 points. But, these I'm not the best at showdown type games, and I consider this sort of a showdown one. And when so many big names come in, as expected, 62% had Diggs, 46% had Stevenson. Now 50% had Gabe Davis. That's pretty high. 56% had St. Brown, 43% had Knox. So 8 points isn't that close, but it would have been nice to get cash in one of these because that would have basically, brought me to like getting 50 back. Yeah, so I would have been like 50, 60 back, something like that on 100. So that was a little disappointing, but I didn't go all crazy on this tournament. All right, so that's basically it. The really, wild thing was the 5-way tie on the Rainmakers one and coming down to serial numbers and that being a $900,000 difference. And then one of the biggest whales winning it, which really isn't that big a surprise because they were going to sort of dominate that contest. And congrats to Shaloub. Like I said, a lot of the whales and the bigger players are on their Discord for Rainmakers if you want to go in there. And they're pretty nice guys on the whole. So that's it. Hope you had a good holiday. I'll be back with some more on the Sunday slate coming up here soon. And go USA in the World Cup. We're getting ready to play England here in like an hour. So win that one, baby.